Blast it. Kick it. Take it. Work it. Lock it up.
June 23rd, 1972 is an important day in the history of this country because of that breakthrough legislation which was passed, which really provided opportunities for women and girls that they had never had before in the history of this country.
Before the passing of Title IX, the thought of ever having professional women's sports teams seemed absurd. Girls' sports were looked upon as more of an activity and were not competitive at all. The primary physical activities for girls were cheerleading and square dancing. Only 1 in 27 girls played high school sports, and there were no college scholarships awarded to female athletes. Female college athletes also only received 2% of overall athletic budgets.
She's just a girl and she's on fire. Hotter than a fantasy. Only like a highway.
At this time, society believed that a woman's only place was in the home. This pushed away the idea that there would be any benefits in women's sports. This view remained largely unchanged until the events of the 1940s, when war was brought to the United States and many women joined the military service or left their positions in the home to fill the void left in the workforce.
Many women believed that if they could compete successfully in the workforce, then they could certainly compete on the athletic fields. World War II also brought about the first women's professional athletic team. The All-American Girls Baseball League was started in 1943 as an attempt to replace Major League Baseball, which had been canceled due to the war. When World War II ended, organizations for women in sports began to increase as sports became more competitive and intercollegiate competition spread.
Collegiate women seeking greater athletic opportunities moved closer to their goals in 1957, when the long-entrenched official position statement of the Division for Girls and Women in Sports, also known as DGWS, was amended to state that intercollegiate programs may exist. In 1963, the DGWS view of women in sport evolved further to state that it was desirable that intercollegiate programs for women exist.
In 1966, the DGWS appointed a Commission on Intercollegiate Sports for Women, CISW, to assist in conducting intercollegiate competitions. In 1967, it was then renamed the Commission on Intercollegiate Athletics for Women, CIAW. The women's movement in sports was rapidly moving toward a status equal to that of men's athletics. In 1969, a schedule of national championships for women's sports was announced. Women wanted an institutional membership organization similar to that of the NCAA. The CIAW was later replaced by the Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women, AIAW, in 1971. This set the stage for the struggle to control women's athletics in the 1970s between the AIAW and the NCAA.
Title IX was officially passed on June 23, 1972. The law stated that gender equity be required for boys and girls in every educational program that receives federal funding. But the fight for women's equal rights was far from over. The AIWA focused on the female student-athlete's education, not on athletic performance, and thus rejected the win-or-die attitude of the NCAA. Instead, the AIAW emphasized participation in sport as the most important aspect and de-emphasized winning.
The NCAA believed that if Title IX was to apply to intercollegiate sports at all levels and women were to be elevated to a status equal to the men, its financial assets and political power were threatened. The first approach of the NCAA was to attempt to limit Title IX's application. The NCAA argued that because athletic departments did not receive federal funds, they should be excluded from compliance. Nonetheless, when the NCAA sought to limit the application of Title IX, it began to address the issue of control of women's athletics. The NCAA decided to form its own women's committee and exclude the AIAW.
The NCAA had never shown an interest in women's athletics before Title IX because there was nothing that required female participation at a national level. Thus, it chose not to pursue women's athletics. The NCAA offered to A. pay all expenses for teams competing in a national championship, B. charge no additional membership fees for schools to add women's programs, C. create financial aid, recruitment, and eligibility rules that were the same for women as for men, and finally, D. guarantee women more television coverage.
Despite all the difficulties in passing Title IX, it turned out to be very successful. After the passing of Title IX, women and girls have become much more involved in sports. College women's athletic participation has increased from 15% in 1972 to 43% in 2001. High school girls' athletic participation increased from 295,000 in 1971 to 2.8 million in 2002 to 2003. In 1981 to 82, women's championships became a part of the NCAA program. Today, the NCAA sponsors 40 women's championships, 38 men's championships, and 3 combined championships in all 3 of its divisions.
It is clear that women's involvement in sports was not something that happened overnight. Opportunities for participation and recognition were almost non-existent for centuries. It was not until the passing of Title IX that women truly found a place as participants in the world of sports and in the public arena.
Kind of a joke in my family because I actually won the Teddy Roosevelt NCAA award for being a scholar athlete. That was in the days when there were no girls varsity sports, and you know, so how I managed to get that award is beyond me, but the bottom line is it made a huge, huge difference in terms of the way that girls and women see each other as capable of competing on an equal field and winning.
In 7th grade, my first goal was to play in the NBA because the WNBA wasn't around. And I worked and I worked, and I was like determined to be a player in the NBA and following my father's footsteps. And then the WNBA came around my freshman year in college at the University of Tennessee, and my goals switched, and it was kind of like a dream come true. You know, just having the opportunity to not play with the NBA where I started, but wanting to play in the WNBA with ladies that have the same dreams and the same goals as me.
Everything's accepted now for women in athletics, and I think Title IX was a big part of that. And I know just as long as I've been coaching, just once Title IX came around, you just opened doors for so many people, and not just in basketball.
When I first got interested in this with the Equal Rights Amendment, which was sort of the grandfather of Title IX, my late wife said, well, Birch, you can't ignore the brain power of 53% of the American people. We tend to think of Title IX when we look at the sports pages. But when you really look at Title IX, the big benefit from Title IX comes from young women having the opportunity academically to learn.
The fact that we're sitting here today in 2012 with over half of the college students are women, over half of and the notion that you know, one of the fastest growing segments of our graduate students in all kinds of fields are women. Economy are women-owned businesses. We know that opening the doors for women to be in science and technology and engineering are hugely important, not just for the advancement of those women and their families, but for this country, to lift up over half of our population and make sure that we are fully productive and fully prosperous in the future means empowering women and girls, and Title IX took a huge step in that direction.
Well, I believe it was so monumental when it was passed just because, you know, obviously the opportunity that it has afforded all of us. And, you know, when I think about what I'm able to do now, playing in the WNBA and being able to be such a huge role model for so many young girls, I think of all the people that came before us, and not just women, but even the men that, you know, helped in passing this law and in making it that important that girls get the same opportunity that men get.
I think it's probably exceeded the expectations because we didn't fully realize the degree of discrimination that was going on at the time. We've arrived. When you ask young women in high school and really in some of our college and university teams, did Title IX help you? And you get a blank stare. What's Title IX? They don't think they're getting special treatment, and they aren't. They're being treated equally the way they should have been in the first place. Title IX made that possible.